And we're pleased to welcome Gershon Baskin, Middle East Director of the International Communities Organization. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you.
Your reaction to the institution of the death penalty in Israel, first since what, 1954 for murders, other than, of course, that of there was the execution of the Nazi Adolf Eichmann in 1962. But other than that, there has been no capital punishment in Israel. And this death penalty only for Palestinians who commit terror attacks.
Right. This is a deep stain on the law books of the State of Israel, and we are expecting that the High Court of Israel, the Supreme Court of Israel, will rule that the law is unconstitutional, primarily because the way that it was written in past discriminates on the basis of nationality between Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs, and this is not going to be held as legal by the High Court. Many people who are critics of the law are not actually attacking the immorality of the law, but are talking about the fact that this is a TikTok law proposed by Itamar Ben-Gvir, our so-called Minister of National Security. Ben-Gvir was a campaign pledge of his that he would pass a death penalty law, and he will be using this in his campaign propaganda when he goes to the public to be reelected to the Knesset and to be a minister in the next government of Israel. Most people believe that the law will never be enacted, and it should never be enacted in the State of Israel.
It passed by quite a wide margin. What is it, 62 to 48? There were even, I believe, two Israeli Arab lawmakers who voted for the measure.
Yeah, there are a number of people from the opposition who voted for the measure. They're not part of a leftist opposition to the right-wing Israeli government. They are part of the opposition to Benjamin Netanyahu personally. They're the anti-Netanyahu camp, but they are definitely on the right wing of the Israeli political spectrum, and they voted with the law. There is a guarantee for this government to pass whatever laws it wants to in the Knesset. They have a majority in the parliament, and they can pass whatever they did. This law has been up for many, many, many years and never passed because no one ever considered that the State of Israel should enact a law with the death penalty. And as I said, we believe that the law will be overturned. If it's not, it will be another stain on the books of Israel, which is marching steadily into its definition of being an apartheid state. This was a judgment to the International Court of Justice, and it's going to be very difficult to argue that Israel has not become an apartheid-type state.
What does it mean for Arab Israelis? 1 in 5 Israeli citizens are not Jews.
Right. Well, it would only, if the law sticks, it would only be relevant to those people who commit acts of terrorism and kill Israelis. The Israeli-Palestinian citizens of Israel, very, very few of them are engaged in acts of terrorism. It's an overwhelmingly law-abiding part of the Israeli public. And it would be mostly enacted against Palestinians in the occupied territories of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. Very few Israeli-Palestinian Arab citizens of Israel would be falling under this law because they simply don't commit acts of murder as acts of terrorism against the State of Israel.
What does it say also about the mood, Gershon Baskin? There's an element, we heard those clips of people on the street before we spoke with you. There's still people who feel after October 7th, how much is there still a sense of, well, the need for vengeance?
Well, the 2-year war in Gaza was a war of revenge. It was not a strategic battle against Hamas. Hamas is still in power in the part of Gaza that it controls, and we're now 4 or 5 months after the war officially ended, and yet very little been done to actually impose the solution that Hamas itself agreed to, which is disarming and turning over government to the National Administrative Council for Gaza, which has been formulated through President Trump's Board of Peace. So the mood in Israel is still very much in a revenge mode. We're fighting this war now in Iran and with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, and much of the Israeli public is enraged by the missile attacks that we're facing. Very few Israelis actually see the damage that Israel is bringing down, both on Iran and on Lebanon, to citizens there who might not be in support of either Hezbollah or the Iranian government. But the mood in Israel is very, very belligerent. and perhaps that's very common in a wartime atmosphere. I hope that this won't last, and we're seeing a decline in support amongst the Israeli public for the war in Iran and for the war in Hezbollah, certainly following the killing of 4 Israeli soldiers today, and we'll see more of these soldiers, God forbid, coming home also wounded and killed in Lebanon. So I think that public opinion will change.
You're confident that this is just a pendulum swing, and that it will revert back. Why are you so confident?
I'm hopeful that this is a pendulum, that there will be a pendulum swing. I'm not convinced that it is. That the mood in Israel is still very right-wing and very religious and very conservative and very anti-Arab, anti-Muslim. And this is part of the environment that we're living in Israel already for years. And this has been a political atmosphere fostered by the government of Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing religious ultra-conservative government here in Israel. It's not easy to make a change of that, but I hope that when we do go to elections, which will probably be in 6 or 7 months from now, if the Israeli public remembers October 7th and who was the leader of the country at the time when Israel failed to defend its own borders and allowed this horrendous attack by Hamas take place, and the 2-year war in Gaza that did not produce the strategic results that we want. The strategic results have to be a change of discourse and an engagement in a peaceful solution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's what we need to see happen in this country.
Was it October 7th where something changed, or was it something earlier? When did something change so that there is that swing? After all, that government that you talk about was elected before October 7th, but when was the moment where Israel changed?
Right. It's important to remember that the government that we have in Israel today was elected almost by default because the left wing was so divided and split, and 2 parties didn't cross the threshold, which enabled Netanyahu to form this horrible government that we have. October 7th was a changing point in Israeli history. It was the worst attack against Jews since the Holocaust, and it was something that's indelibly printed on the mindset of the Israeli public today. Even Israelis who were advocates of peace changed their opinions after October 7th and believe that we can never make peace with our Palestinian neighbors. But there will be an awakening, because there is no military solution to the conflicts that we're involved in. There are only political, diplomatic solutions. We have a president in the United States who for the first time actually engaged with the Israeli public in ending the war in Gaza that the Israeli public demanded. So maybe there can be a change that will come from Washington as well with regard to the overall Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
When you hear the Israeli defense minister earlier in the day talking about a Gaza-style occupation of southern Lebanon, is that just bluster, or is Israel's mindset now that the answers to everything are military?
Well, that's this government is certainly the answers. I'm not convinced that the Israeli public fully supports that. We're a very divided public, but I don't understand a world where someone believes that erasing entire villages in southern Lebanon is going to solve anything, or that it's just immoral. It cannot be accepted, not by the Israeli public and not by anyone in our neighborhood here in the Middle East or in the Western world. I think that the passing of the death penalty law and the policies that Israel is engaged in the occupied territories, with the violence of the settlers going unpunished by the government of Israel, have to lead countries in Europe to also consider whether or not the association agreement between the State of Israel and the European Union have legality, have a basis of being continued. This special relationship between Israel and Europe needs to be weighed on the European side of whether or not Israel has not crossed a line which makes Israel no longer a state which should have any special favor within the European Union.
One final question. I'm France 24, so I have to ask it. What do you make of the French refusing that overfly of U.S. planes carrying military equipment to Israel?
Yeah, I think it's a hard case to make for France, because the United States is calling on France and the United Kingdom and other countries of Europe to join in a fight to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz remains open. And as President Trump said, the United States doesn't get its oil from there, but all of Europe does. And there might be a reason for Europe to second think about whether or not it's going to join in some kind of international effort to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz is open. Of course, I believe that the best way of doing that is by sitting down and talking and negotiating and make sure that this war comes to an end, that Iran never has the chance of being a nuclear state, and that its missile threat and its support of its radical proxies in the region are not continued. But this needs to come out of a negotiated agreement that hopefully the Pakistani government is leading today with the help of others in the region. Maybe this will be taken seriously, and then we can see a diplomatic end to this war that will not leave Iran in a position where it's endangering the economy of the world or the security of the world.
Gershon Baskin, so many thanks for joining us from Jerusalem.
Thank you.